Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's Saturday Studio, the Norton's visual art making session meant to expand your creativity through art making exercises inspired by the collection. My name is Yimarie Rivera, Associate Curator of Education for Family and Community Programs at the Norton Museum. Once upon a time, I was a studio art major at the University of South Florida in Tampa. My focus was on drawing, painting, and printmaking. Today's art activity is designed to concentrate on composition, space, and pattern through collage. As our source of inspiration, we will focus on the 2021 RAW Recognition of Art by Women artist, Maria Berrio. Her exhibition, Esperando mientras la noche florece, Waiting for the Night to Bloom, is comprised of large-scale, vibrant collages that are methodically pieced together from paper from the Far East and South America. Using paper in a painterly way, Berrio creates scenes partially inspired by South American folklore, where humans and nature coexist in a realm of magical realism. Throughout history, collage has been used to explore a variety of subject matter. As you look closely, Berrio's compositions use a variety of elements to create intrigue and contrast. Like her use of soft, smooth watercolor placed alongside torn and cut paper. Her collages create a flatness to the picture plane while still creating the illusion of depth and space through proportion, angles, and juxtaposing colors. Focus on her use of patterning, which creates visual movement throughout each piece. I'm highly drawn to her figures in her work. Quoting Maria Berrio, "They are embodied ideals of femininity. The ghostly pallor of their skin suggests an otherworldliness. They appear to be more spirit, that of flesh. These are women I want to be, strong, vulnerable, compassionate, courageous, and in harmony with themselves and nature. They combine the elements of women who are typically thought of as powerful, the captains of industry, resolute politicians, fury activists, with the traits of those who are not usually thought of as such, thereby underlying the common forces found in all women. As a new mother, I plan to explore these ideas by creating a portrait collage of my son. I will be working from a photograph, but feel free to choose your own image that exemplifies your chosen subject matter. Now, let's begin to compose our own collage." So as we begin to organize our collage, first let's start out by pointing out the materials that we will need. I have my trusty sketchbook, and then I have these really unique pieces of paper. Has some little gold gilding on it. You see the reflective patterning. This washed out gray is almost of a wood print texture, and then these cute little florals in a green. Additionally, I have a coffee filter that I really love the translucent quality of this. I have used diluted acrylic to create a wash and a patterning on this. And I will use this as well on my collage. My collage, as I mentioned, is going to be of my son, who newly turned 1 year old. So I chose this image because it reminded me of the cropping in Maria's work and how she uses space. And I also want to create that dreamlike sense that's in her work, that magical realism. So I love this corner that Maria has created where her paper collage pattern meets this wash background. I really love that dark and the colorful combinations. I'm going to create the space starting with the pillow and then highlighting the figure. And so I have a very light sketch here. I'm going to just darken it. And I'm outlining the pillow. And the lines I'm using for the pillow are a very hard edge because I want to delineate where I'm going to add my cut pieces of paper, and I want it to have that strong hard edge and contrast, just like in this work right here. And so I'm going to work on the figure. I don't want a super detailed image of the figure. I want a very simplistic line drawing. I want it to be all about the patterning. I want to have a very quiet image of him sleeping. So just a very soft line drawing. I'm going to darken it slightly. His lines for his eyes are just very faint, very soft. Not too much shadow, not too much detail, very soft lines. Maybe just a little bit of detail for eyebrows, but barely. Just like in Maria's portraits, where the figures and the skin tones are kind of this watercolor wash, I will be using diluted acrylic for the face and the skin. Now I'm gonna work the blanket. The folds of the blanket will all be of, I'm thinking these really soft and sweet flowers in green. And so the folds, there's a beautiful fold right here, which can be drawn to have the illusion of depth. I'm organizing a very abstracted composition. So there's a little play on space here with the triangles, and I'm thinking right now that I will have these darker than the foreground just to create that illusion of depth. So I'm probably gonna use this dark blue right in those corners, if you can see that line. For the pillow, I'm gonna use the textured gray wood wash. So I'm gonna start composing my mini work. This is just a mock-up. And so I know the size that I wanna use. This is my pillow. And I'm really just eyeballing this and using the edge of my sketchbook as a straight edge. So I'm gonna work in layers. I'm thinking about my foreground, what's in the very front, what's the next layer, the background, the midground, and then my background. So this is going to be my pillow. And then now I really do want to use this figure, so I'm actually gonna cut this out. So I'm gonna cut the details out of my drawing. And my drawing is actually gonna be used kind of like a stencil as well. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, and now I'm gonna figure out what patterning. There's really beautiful patterning in Maria's work. This is really bold. Each stripe that you see here is cut paper. These stripes, horizontal and vertical. The scarf is full of beautiful detail of cut paper. These look like raspberries and lemons. And again here in the carpet or quilt that the figures are laying on, this is also cut paper. So I'm really inspired by that patterning. So I want the baby's blanket to have really beautiful patterning. So I might just mix these two. And now I'm going to cut out my outline. When I get to the area where the blanket meets the neck, I'm gonna eyeball that, but we'll worry about that later. First, we need to cut out the entire outline of the blanket. And so we've already started, and again, beautiful flowering right here, those flower patterns. So I've already started making a pattern here, and I wasn't too far off for the blanket. Now I'm going to do the neckline, just drawing it in. And then I'm going to cut that out. All right, not too too bad. And so where the excess is, you could do two things. You could fill that in with more paper, and it creates some beautiful texture there. Or you could create some contrast by adding a different layer of paper. So some decisions have to be made there. Also, the beautiful folds, I'm just gonna draw that in. And I'm drawing right on top of my cutout. So I'm adding these details right back to it because her work is so detailed. And in these little curves, these little lines where the folds are, eventually I want to add a different pattern too, just to create some depth and the illusion of and the illusion of folds. Now that I have the details drawn in, very light details, I'm going to glue the floral pattern right onto the figure, creating the blanket. So, like little glue for my study, so Elmer's glue will do. I'm gonna finish my little details, drawing them in. So I've decided this little excess, I'm going to add more of my floral. And I'm just drawing it, what I see, this line, kind of measuring it out. And it gives this overlapping effect. I'm really liking this. And so now I want to start working on the detail and give the blanket a little more detail. The blanket has this piping, like this polka dot piping. And I wanna create the same effect, but not polka dots. I'm gonna use this metallic for the little detail in the blanket. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to trace. Again, I'm gonna use this little piece of the blanket that I just created to create that overlapping effect, that folded effect. And I'm gonna trace this for the piping. The line I just created, the edge that I just traced, I'm gonna move the little piece of the blanket down a little bit, and you see how that's gonna create that piping effect. And I'm gonna trace the other side, so I know how much to cut. And now I'm gonna trace the other side so I know how much to cut. And so I'm playing with my overlay now on the little details. I really like this, but I kind of want to hide some of all that sheen. I don't want it to overpower the figure. And again, I just want it to look like piping. And now cutting out these little sharp edges. I want it really soft and smooth, rounded, no hard edges. I feel like I'm almost drawing with the scissors. So there, I've designed my piping, the detailed part of the blanket. Like I mentioned, this gray wood grain texture, this paper, I'm going to use as the pillow. So as I mentioned, I'm looking at my composition. And as I mentioned, something that I really love in Maria's work is how she creates the illusion of depth with either colors and proportions. So I have my proportions set, but I also want to create this light and dark with shadow, which is surrounding the baby. So I'm thinking of creating the shadow using this darker turquoise color. So placing it around the figure to kind of have the baby have some weight and sit into the pillow. Before I create the shadows in my pillow, just want to make sure I know where I'm going to place the figure of the baby on this gray square. So I'm just making little markers for myself. where it's gonna lay on the base paper. This is in my sketchbook for the study. So to make my shadow, again, we're gonna go back to the tracing technique. The same tracing technique we used to make the blanket, we used to make the piping. That same technique that I kind of referenced, felt like I was drawing with the scissors. We're gonna use that technique again to create the shadow of the baby. So our highest point of dark shadow is at the top. So I'm gonna cut a little extra up here, and then it becomes a bit muted down to the right and the left. So we know the light is straight on. And I'm gonna just freehand, just do a trace. Here's my figure. And I'm doing a light trace, but giving it some space. So not directly on the cutout of the figure. It's really light. I have my shadow, this darker turquoise green. I don't want it as rounded. I don't want it to feel like a halo. So I'm gonna do again a little drawing with my scissors. And even here in the image, if I isolate the dark marks, it's kind of jagged. So I'm gonna kind of make that graphic sensibility in this turquoise paper. Okay, I'm gonna cutting out the detail to my shadow. And it's okay if it's jagged. Remember, we don't want it too round. Making little triangular shapes, a little rigid. Just drawing in some detail into my shadow. I'm gonna cut it right back out. These tiny cuts kind of give the illusion as if you were just drawing in that shadow. We think of paper as so delicate. It's actually so malleable. It's so strong. The more you layer it, the stronger it gets. And so my composition is it's coming together. I got my foreground, my midground. It's ready to be glued together. But I also want to think about my background. How I'm going to use this beautiful translucent paper. I love thinking of this as if it were the night sky, giving it that mystical, dreamlike quality. Kind of like how she has this beautiful background and the dream of flight. And so again, this is just coffee filters and diluted acrylic, and just create a wash and have fun with it, and use little marks to create moments of pure pigment. So this is really beautiful. And these are using just golden acrylics. So I just want to make sure I have my midground completely set so I can move on to my background. So I'm revisiting it. And so I use the tissue paper in the back to give that illusion of depth, and also the marbling and effect kind of gives it this whimsical feel, like the night sky, very romantic, and perfect with the subject matter. The figure is sleeping. I want to make sure everything is smooth and laid down. This is just a study, and I would create a larger work from this. From my study, I'd kind of work on my shadows. I love these little jagged moments. And so my final detail would be to paint in the skin color with diluted acrylic. But this is my complete composition. And it's just this little part right here that I want to add a wash of acrylic. And I want to create this golden pink fleshy tone. So again, I want to create this light golden pink, a rosy pink, almost rose gold. It's just a very light wash. So I'm diluting my acrylic with a lot of water. I'm using a tiny detail brush because his face is so tiny. Activating the paper with the water. And again, I don't want to take away from the line drawing that I created because I'm going to go back over that. And since this is a study, I would normally go back over those lines with paint. But today, I'm going to go over it with just a Sharpie. But for the actual work, I would definitely go back over it with detailed lines of paint. I love how Maria just uses these subtle detail using paint on the nails, the face. Once that dries, I will go over it with Sharpie. Now I'm putting just some details in for the hair. So there we have it. I just finished putting in the detail to my little study. I normally would go back in with acrylic paint to do those details and definitely do a wash for the hair and some of the details in the eyes and the eyebrows. But this is my beautiful collage inspired by Maria Berrio, and I can't wait to see what you all create and the wonderful collages you create inspired by her work. Her work is currently on view at the museum, so please come. The museum is open for you to enjoy, and let's see your creations on #Norton Saturday Studio. I'll definitely be posting mine.